Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. And my favorite cell phone of all time, like my favorite unboxing of a cell phone and holding a cell phone in my hand, was the black Motorola Razr from like 2005, 2006? I don't know. There was something about holding that phone that just felt like the future, And even though I'm sure looking back now, it was complete garbage. I don't even think that it took video, but there was something about it, man. What was your favorite cell phone of all time? I want to know. All right, anyway, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back, one. Welcome back, all. I am so happy to have you here with me today for this interview of the Beginner Photography Podcast. It's a good one, and one that is based off... I know that a lot of you listening enjoyed hearing about other forms of photography that maybe you're not deeply into because it provides a different perspective. And I hope that that's what today's interview will bring. But first, this week has been a big week. It's been a monster week. I've had business epiphanies and decided to go in different directions and try all new things together and go forward with a game plan. And all this sounds kind of cryptic, but I promise you it's all good things coming in the future. And I'm really excited about. But in terms of like my photography and stuff, it's been a lot of editing, a lot of... I went to I shot a wedding that was hands down one of the hottest weddings I've ever been to. But the good thing that came out of it, right? I mean, here I am. I'm a big dude, right? Here I am. I'm just sweating, which is not uncommon for me at weddings. But luckily at this wedding, so was everybody else. But I'm just like pouring through my shirt at this wedding. And the videographer, like I see him looking great, right? Looking wonderful. I mean, he's like dabbing his head. I can tell that he's sweating, but his shirt, which is a white shirt, by the way, minty fresh. And I was like, what is your secret? What? Like, how are you doing this? This is insane. This is great. And he said, you got to check out this thing. He said that his wife found it called a Thompson tee. And I was like, what's a Thompson tee? And he said, it's like a shirt, but the material is like made out of like a ShamWow or something like that. So it just totally soaks up all that sweat and leaves you fresh, clean, and dry and wonderful. Right away, before I even left that wedding, I purchased a Thompson tee on Amazon. I got it, and we've had some hot days recently. I've been out, and I've been wearing it, and this thing is incredible. This is not... I just realized that, like, obviously podcasts do a lot of sponsorships and stuff, and this is in no way a sponsorship for Thompson Tea, but I just got to, talk to its value. I found it helpful, and if you sweat a lot, maybe you would find it helpful too. Wonderful wedding. Since then, my life has just been nothing but editing and album designs, and I had a maternity session, which... maternity sessions I don't normally do them. But I have a caveat. I will do them for couples whose weddings I've shot and like I really enjoyed working with them. You know what I mean? If I really enjoy a couple and I shot their wedding, I will always reach out and ask if they would like a maternity session. However, this time I didn't actually have to do that because the mother of the groom actually messaged me way before I even had a chance to message them. And she said, Raymond, we love the wedding photos so much. I want to gift her son and daughter-in-law a maternity session. And I said, you got it. You got it. I was so excited. So I got to drive up close to Chicago. It was about 3 hours away. And yeah, it was just great catching up. You know what I mean? There's times like you go to these weddings and obviously the couple is wrapped up in their day and enjoying their time, and you feel like you have a really good like connection with them. But when you leave, you really still don't know much about them. And this was just a time that it was, them and me, and we were talking just about life, and it just felt really good to reconnect. And I'm really happy with the photos that I got. And it just turned out to be an incredible weekend. So super happy with that. Also, one thing that I've been just totally geeking over is that I know that by the time you're listening to this, it's July. Okay, I get that, right? Half the year is over, the 7th month of the year. We're more than halfway into 2018. But ever since our first ever since our only son, our first child, Charlie, was born, I use like PhotoStream on my phone, so all my photos get uploaded to the Photos app on my computer. And when the year that Charlie was born, Apple, at the time it was like Apple iPhoto said, like, hey, we made a book for you. And I was like, what is this thing? I clicked on it, and it was just like a book of the past year, the past calendar year. And a lot of it had to do with like my wife's pregnancy leading up to Charlie's birth. And I thought, this is great. This is wonderful. Like, I love this. So I found that I could kind of edit it myself. I rearranged it to how I wanted it to be focused on the pregnancy and the birth. And then after he was born, I made another one for Charlie's entire first year of life. Like, it was so much fun, looking back at these photos. Ever since then, I've decided that I'm going to make a family yearbook, right? Super easy to do, and it's even easier to do in Lightroom than it is in iPhoto. However, Google Photos also has an option, so if you use Google Photos on your phone, you can do it there as well. I don't know how flexible it is, but I just use Lightroom, and man, I can pump this thing out in like 2 hours. And so since 2012, I've made a family yearbook, and we just got our 2017 family yearbook. I finally, sat down and took the 2 hours it took to make the book and then have it printed, and we finally got it. And it's so much fun being able to hold those photos, because there's so many moments where I completely forgot what was going on. I completely forgot the why I took the photo, but looking at the photos printed is like it's a visual roadmap, you know what I mean, of this past year. And looking at it, it doesn't look like, oh, we've changed that much. But when you look at our daughter Parker, who just turned 2 in May, right? So last year, May of 2017 was her first birthday. This girl was bald. She had 0 hair, and now she has just like locks of flowing hair. I mean, she's an entirely different child. But it's great to see through the photos, her personality still shines through in every single one. And something like that is just, it's been fun not only to create, but to be able to look back on. So I want to know how you preserve your photos, right? Do you just take them and then look at them every once in a while? Do you take them and then get them printed in 4x6s often? Do you take them and then do you create some sort of book? I truly want to know. Because, with digital, it's great, right? You can take as many photos as you want. You can store as many photos as you want. And just keep buying more hard drives. But we lose the tactile aspect of photography, and I don't like that. I want to focus more on prints, on something tangible, to remember my memories. I want to know what you do. Please let me know. If you are part of the Facebook group, the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, leave me a status or comment. Post a comment. Let me know what it is that you do with your photos, okay? I want to take one last minute for business before we get into this interview, and I'm really happy about this because it's another 5-star review on iTunes, right? You guys are just killing it with these 5-star reviews. Here we go. This is from, get this, Bearcat, pretty much the coolest name ever. No, I'd say that it's safe to say that it is the coolest name ever. Okay, so Bearcat says, I love this podcast. First of all, the review is called My Go-To Podcast. with 2 exclamation points. So, that's pretty much 6-star review. Anyway, here we go. I love this podcast. I'm a hobbyist photographer and have been shooting in manual for about a year now. I'm really trying to up my skills, and since I'm on the go a lot, podcasts have been a great resource. I've listened to the majority of the big dogs and must-haves everyone recommends, as well as those that I found on my own. This one, which I just recently discovered, is hands down my favorite. Yes. While not every episode talks about an issue or a skill that I haven't learned yet, I always take away something positive for each episode, and I keep scrolling back to enjoy earlier ones as well. That's so great. Raymond and his guests are a delight to listen to and a breath of fresh air in the stuffy world of photography podcasts. Keep it up. Oh, man. Yeah. I feel like rays of sunshine are shining down on me here. It's like 10:30 p.m. I feel like rays of sunshine are coming down on me right now. I feel that energy. I feel how excited Bearcat is to enjoy photography again, to get into photography. And I'm so glad that you are taking away something from each episode, even if it has nothing to do with what it is that you shoot. And that is why I bring those guests on, right? You can learn so much from walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, as they say. But photography, we all wear shoes. Where am I trying to go with this? How am I trying to relate this? We all wear shoes. We're all photographers. We may take different paths. We all have something to learn from each other. How does that work? Okay. Anyway, that's why I'm really excited about today's interview. Okay, it is with an architectural. Why is this such a hard word for me? Architectural. A photographer who focuses on architecture. And it's something, like I mentioned, that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to architecture. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what sort of gear I need. I have a basic idea, but this interview, lays out some of those questions, and I really enjoyed my time talking with Wade. So I'm just gonna let you guys get into it, and I know that there's gonna be a nugget in this episode that you guys are gonna pick up on and be like, mind blown. This is wonderful. Okay, so here we go. My interview with Wade Steelman. How cool is that last name? Okay, let's get. Today's guest is San Diego commercial and residential photographer who focuses on architecture. Today, I welcome Wade Steelman. Wade, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I'm excited to talk to you today because I don't really get to talk to a lot of architectural photographers. Okay, yeah. There you go. I don't know why that was so hard for me to get out right there. I don't get to talk to a lot of photographers who specialize in like real estate and things like that. I've had just one, maybe 2 on in the past, and it's always completely fascinating to me because, like I said just right before this, I shoot a lot of weddings. I don't get to shoot more of the commercial side to things, and that whole aspect of the world really fascinates me. So I'm really excited to have you on, and I really do appreciate you coming on today. But before we kind of get into all of that, all the goodness, can you tell me how you got your start in photography to begin with?
Well, that's actually a funny story. So I'm actually retired military. Spent a little over 20 years in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And a couple years before I was getting ready to retire, I knew I had to figure out what I was going to do. I always had the option of going to work for the government after you retire kind of thing, but I knew I didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. I knew I wanted to do something on my own. There was a time period in there where I almost became a cabinet maker because I love woodworking.
Oh, cool.
And I was very close to purchasing a cabinet company. A gentleman I knew was getting ready to retire from that. But then one night, a friend of mine who happens to be a large real estate broker in one of the higher end kind of neighborhoods here, mm-hmm. He opened his own brokerage house. They were having a grand opening party one night. It was a Friday night. He invited a bunch of his real estate and broker friends and free wine. So the wine started flowing a little bit. During that night, conversations were happening, and then I started hearing a lot about how they were complaining about their real estate photographer. They just weren't happy. And I kind of think they were using the same one, but I wasn't sure. So I talked to my buddy, and I told him, hey, I could probably do this. I'd had a camera for a while. I think it was a Nikon D like 7000 or something, like little crop sensor camera.
Mm-hmm, okay.
With a kit lens, 18 to 55 or whatever it was. And I figured I could figure this out. So I talked to him, and he said, yeah, I can let you in a house, and you can, practice, see what you got, and show us what you can do. So the next morning I hurried up and I purchased Scott Hargis's real estate tutorial, his real estate photography tutorial. So I watched that probably 2 or 3 times, practiced in my own house and tried to figure it out. And then I went in one of my buddy's houses, and I spent all day in there just shooting all by myself. He was gone. He left me the keys kind of thing, and I just spent all day in there. After that day, I went home and I talked to my wife, and I said, you know what, I think this is what I want to do. I really enjoyed today. I think I can do this. I can figure it out. Obviously, I got a lot of road bumps ahead of me, but I think I can get it. So after that, I just started shooting for my buddies' empty houses. Going in there, some were staged, some weren't, some were just barely, might have had a couch and a coffee table in it, and that was about it. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a little while. And then after I got comfortable, I sent, a blank email, a cold start email out to a few of his real estate friends. And I said, hey, I'm getting into real estate photography. I'd love to shoot a listing for you. I'll shoot it. If you like it and want to use the images, you can pay me. If you don't like it and you think I do a horrible job, you don't have to pay me anything, kind of thing. Right. So that's how I kind of got started, and it just snowballed from there. I think I got better and better and better as the time went on. And then, tried to get every tutorial I could buy, get my hands on, every YouTube video. I had to learn from scratch how to use Lightroom and Photoshop, and now I'm using Capture One and Bridge and all that kind of stuff. So I had to start from scratch with all that. But over time, I just, kept working and kept working and kept working. And that's pretty much how I got my start.
How long ago was that when you showed up to your first house?
That was 2015.
Okay, so not really long ago.
Not long ago.
Wow.
I spent a lot of time. It's when you start your own business, the saying is it's business owners are the only people that work 80 hours a week to prevent from working 40 hours a week.
Of course, yeah.
So I was definitely putting those hours in. I have 2 young boys, a wife, so I'd work all day. We'd have dinner, we'd play and put them to bed, and after they'd go to bed, then I'd stay up and work and
just kept going at it.
Just kept going until mid hours of the night, just trying to figure it out. Next day I'd be at another house or another property or my house, just trying to figure something out I was having problems with.
Wow. So you talked obviously about having had that Nikon camera before, the D7000 or something comparable. Did you know much about like the technical aspect of photography before you kind of offered up your service, or was that camera like the family camera? Like why did you have that camera?
It was pretty much a family camera. Okay. And before that day, I don't think I ever took the mode switch out of auto. Okay. To be honest with you, I just didn't have a reason. Didn't know much about exposure triangle and aperture priority and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't know it.
Wow.
So
how were you feeling when you watched that first tutorial video all about architectural photography, and I'm assuming you learned that there's so much more to your camera than just auto?
I did. It was pretty much like jumping off the deep end of a pool.
That's great.
And you better learn to swim or figure something else out.
Wow.
So that's what I did. And, I'd stay up all hours of the night watching YouTube videos, free YouTube videos on exposure triangle, how to work my camera, things like that, and what I needed to buy, through watching Scott Hargis's videos, flashes, speed lights, stands, triggers, all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, pretty much I just jumped in the deep end and watched YouTube videos for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Wow. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your beginning setup. I'm assuming that you talked there about learning what new gear was important and what you had to buy. But in the beginning, I'm sure that you didn't invest a ton of money to get it all up front. What were you using in the beginning? It was literally just your Nikon camera and the stock lens?
In the beginning, it was. The first thing I had to buy was a tripod. I didn't even have a tripod. So I jumped on eBay and I kind of did some research about tripod reviews, and I had my budget, what I could spend. So I kind of had an idea of what I wanted. Jumped on eBay and found what I could get in my budget, and I just started ordering that. And then I was looking for speed lights. So I found this company called Yongnuo. I purchased, I think, 3 or 4 Yongnuo speed lights off of eBay. Yeah. Got those, got the triggers, and then speedlight stands. I bought some cheapies from Amazon. I think I spent $20 a piece on them and bought 3 or 4 of them. They were some tripod-looking stands. They didn't last very long because I'm pretty rough on gear. So they didn't last very long. So I ended up buying some Manfrotto, like nano stands or something.
Sure.
But that's kind of where I started. And then I used like one of my Navy bags.
To carry it all in?
To carry it all in.
That's
and
great.
when that's how I went walking in my first houses, carrying this Navy bag. And I did have a pack for my camera and lens and stuff. Mm-hmm. But, I made a few dollars. I found a few agents that I don't know if they loved the shots, but they were acceptable to them to use. So I started making a little bit of money, and then I went and bought a Tokina, I don't know, 10 to 18 millimeter
Ultra
lens
wide.
for an APC, for my APC sensor. So that's what I used for, 6 months or so, just trying to learn how to do it and make a little money to try to and reinvest that into more gear.
Yeah. I want to know what was before you went to your first shoot, what did you learn from that tutorial video that stood out to you the most? What did you want to go into that house and capture, knowing that like if I get that one shot, I'm good. Everything else is just extra.
I think when I started, because my career in the military was I was a computer systems engineer. Okay. So I had a very technical background, and that's kind of where my mind was at. So when I watched Scott Hargis's videos, I was unconsciously concentrating on the technical aspects. Mm-hmm. Hey, how am I going to figure out how to trigger these things? Where is he placing them? What's the power setting that I'm going to use on these things and things like that. So that's where I concentrated on. And I studied that, as much as I could online, but then I just had to practice it.
Sure.
I used my house. I'd set up the camera. I'd put the triggers, set up the triggers, put the speedlights where I thought they should go, and, try to set the power level of where I might, where I thought it should be. Mm-hmm. Over time, that changed drastically, but I think that's where my head was when I first started, was the more technical aspect.
Has that changed now?
It has, very
mm-hmm.
much.
So now when you go into a house, what are you trying to showcase? What are you trying to tell?
Well, the first thing, when you're shooting real estate's actually different than a lot of other genres of photography, but when you're shooting real estate, the goal is to try to show the property. Mm-hmm. What is a viewer going to want to see as he's walking through the property through your images? So as soon as I step on the property in the in the driveway, I'm looking at what should a viewer be concentrating on, what does he want to see? And that's where I kind of start. As I enter the home, then I'm looking, the front entryway, how does it look? How are the rooms connecting? So I think I'm concentrating more now on composition versus the technical aspect. Because the technical aspect, kind of once you learn it, it becomes kind of second nature.
Right.
But now I think I would concentrate more on just composition alone.
Okay.
What the viewer is going to see when he's walking through a property.
Right. I know with wedding photography, I can get as creative or as, I don't want to say boring, but I guess as documentary as I want to. Right. I can show up and just take a photo and then that's it. That's what they get. Or I can create something from nothing, bring it into Photoshop and just go nuts with it. When it comes to like real estate photography, how much creative freedom or control do you have?
Not much at all. Mm-hmm. Real estate photography, if you're going to try to make a living at it, you have to be fast at it. Mm-hmm. It is more of a low budget genre than a lot of other things. So you have to be quick at it and do multiple jobs in a single day to be able to earn a living. So you have to be quick. And usually as I'm walking through a property and I go into a single room, I'm looking at where I'm going to drop the tripod, drop the camera. And usually it's going to be in a corner somewhere so I can show the entire room. Mm-hmm. You don't really have a lot of creative leeway, especially with the agents in my, real estate agents in my market. Right. They want to see the expansiveness of the room and show how large the room is, where the furniture can go and things like that. So my main goal is to show the rooms, but then show how the rooms connect so a viewer can actually walk through the home visually just by sitting down at a computer.
Okay, that makes sense. So the creative side is less in Photoshop and more camera angles and trying to tell that story.
Yes.
Okay, I love that. That's a really good insight. And really different than how I look at photography. Obviously, like you just mentioned, the importance of composition. It's there, but I think a lot of times wedding photographers are looked at to, bring in some extra sun rays here or anything extra in post-production afterwards. Right. When it comes to working indoors, I guess, I know a lot of times there's tricks with like bracketing and stuff like that to get the exposure of the outside so that you could then Photoshop in the window. Are there any other technical aspects of like real estate photography that you do day in and day out that maybe another genre of photography would almost never do?
I think so, and you kind of mentioned some of it. Whenever I step into a room doing real estate photography, my workflow consists of getting an exposure bracket, an ambient light exposure bracket, which depending on how bright it is outside might be either 3 or 5.
Yeah.
I rarely go to a 7 exposure bracket just because most of the time I don't need it. But it's either a 3 or 5 ambient exposure bracket. Then my next step is to get what I call a flash layer, which I will turn most of the inside lights off just because the color cast that they produce can be quite a pain when it gets in Photoshop.
Sure.
But then, once I can get my flash bracket, and that's where I'm setting my speed lights, where I think they should go, or using what I call a flash on a stick, which is just a monopod with a speed light on the end of it.
I got one of those. They're great.
Okay. So I'm getting that flash shot. And then once I get the flash shot knocked out, then sometimes I'll do a window pull, sometimes I won't. And what I mean by window pull is if you expose for the inside, the windows are going to be blown out or pure white, right? So sometimes, most of the time real estate agents don't like that. So you have to bring in the outside view, and we do what's called a window pull technique, where we expose for the outside, and then I'll flash the window frame to make it brighter. And that will give me my outside exposure where I can pull that into Photoshop and very quickly change that outside view from being blown out and solid white to the actual view that you can see.
I got it. That's smart. I've tried in the few times I've tried to bracket like that, where I take a properly exposed photo of the interior and then try to get a exposed shot through the windows. I never tried using the flash like that, and I always found that I had like minor inconsistencies. And that flash trick is genius. That's really smart. Yeah. Next time not that I take actually any real estate photos, but next time I go to need that technique, I'm going to think of you. So thank you so much.
And the technique is all over YouTube. People call it the darken Photoshop blending mode technique, where if you make the window frames brighter than the inside, then you can just make a selection in Photoshop, change the blending mode to darken, and it'll just pull in the darken pixels from the outside.
Gotcha. See, I need to use more Photoshop. After talking with Brian Rogers Jr., I definitely need to spend more time in Photoshop for sure. When you are, I'm sure that I don't want to say maybe look through your competition, but look through other architecture and real estate photos. What is a telltale sign of just an amateur photo?
Well, I think with all the software that's available right now, people are using what they call an HDR process, or a high dynamic range software, like Photomatix or Lightroom has something that it can do now. A lot of people, or not a lot of people, but a lot of what I like to call the lower budget real estate shooters will use that, and you can immediately tell that it's an HDR image. I don't use HDR. I don't like it. You can make a living at doing it that way. There are a lot of agents in my market in Southern California that all they want is cheap and quick. So the market is out there for those kind of people. It's just not me, because I don't enjoy doing that. It's not fun to me, so I just choose not to do it that way.
Okay, so is that just so that I get a clear understanding, are we talking taking just one image and like lowering the highlights all the way down and raising up the shadows all the way? Are we talking still several images and then creating one image out of 2 or 3 images of different exposures?
So that consists of taking several auto exposure bracket images, either 3 or 5, depending on what camera or what they're doing. Taking those images, and running them through software like Photomatix or Lightroom or something like that. I think there's some other ones out there, but running it through the software, and it gives you an output of a image with a higher dynamic range than a normal camera can get. But there's always telltale signs when people run it through that kind of software. Mm-hmm. Even though it's getting better these days, there's always a sign where you can kind of tell.
Right, of course. Yeah, it's a little bit cheating. I get it.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, you know, if you got to be quick and you can find customers that like that and that'll pay for that, then, you know, good on them, you know, if that's what they want to do. But that's just not what I want to do.
Sure. No, of course. I totally understand that. When you first started, when you decided to pursue real estate photography and architecture photography, what do you think from, I know that we don't talk a lot about business on this podcast, but from that business standpoint, what's the hardest part about, I guess, either finding clients or like the client experience? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the hardest part is finding the clients that will trust you to produce a quality product, kind of thing. I think the toughest thing that I had in the beginning, or the toughest part for me, was getting images for a portfolio. You know, unless you can find properties to shoot, you can't really get images.
Of course.
I did a lot of cold calling where, you know, I'd call up agents. That got me pretty much nowhere. I think out of 50 calls, I might have got one that said yes to me.
Oh, wow.
I called up a lot of new construction model companies or new construction companies where I'd say, you know, hey, if you let me come in and photograph your models, I'll give you the images for free. I'm just trying to get some portfolio images. These days, the construction companies aren't little local construction companies. They're huge nationwide companies. Mm-hmm. So they don't like you. They have their own photographers and they don't like to let people in their properties. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I got any of those companies to say yes to me. So I was lucky in the aspect of getting a portfolio together because I had a buddy that was a broker and he let me come in. So I was able to put together, I don't know, maybe 10 images that I thought were worthy of marketing. Mm-hmm. So out of those 10 images, I would send them to, you know, via emails, which is kind of unheard of these days, but cold emails saying, hey, I want to shoot your real estate photos. I did send out a mail marketing type campaign where I did some postcards with those images. I might have gotten 2 out of that. It didn't do much for me.
And that was going to other real estate agents or brokers?
That was. I would mail these postcards, 4x5 postcards mm-hmm. with my images and my contact information to 100 or 200 real estate agents. And I might have gotten 1 or 2 off of that one. Wow.
So obviously having connections within the industry is very helpful.
Yes.
Has there ever been this is a new question that I'm excited to start asking people because I think beginners are really focused on gear.
As I was in the beginning.
Oh, perfect. Then this is going to be, you're the perfect person to ask this question. Has there ever been a piece of gear that you just knew that you had to have, and then once you got it, or now today, you don't even use it at all?
I would say I was real stuck on the higher end stuff. Like Pocket Wizard triggers. I was real stuck on Pocket Wizard triggers. I bought, after the Ognuos, I went out and bought Nikon speedlights, the higher end, because for some reason I had in my mind that they were going to produce better light. Yeah, you know what I mean? And then I bought the high-end lenses and stuff like that. Now, if you look in my real estate bag, the Nikon speedlights have been sold on eBay. The Pocket Wizard triggers have been sold on eBay, and I have the cheap. I think I have some Flashpoint speedlights in there mm-hmm. And Flashpoint triggers. But there was never one piece of gear that I thought I absolutely had to have. It was more of a collection of gear, and it was a collection of the higher end stuff, which, you know, I was lucky enough to be able to go out and buy that. But looking back, I wish I didn't. Right. I wish I would have bought the cheaper stuff and learn how to take images off the cheaper stuff, because in the end, it's whatever images you can produce with whatever gear you have. And if you can figure out how to produce great images from the cheapest of gear, then you're miles ahead of anybody else.
That's A perfect quote. That is going to be your quote. That was absolutely perfect right there. I really wish that there was some way to, and I know that you can tell new photographers, you can hammer that in their head all day, every day. But I think it's not until that they really experience that they truly understand what that really means, unfortunately. But I'm glad that, I have felt the same way about, I mean, just half the things. I'm looking around my office and I'm like, why did I even buy that? I never even needed it. Have you ever had an embarrassing moment on the job that you'd be happy to share?
The only embarrassing, well, this is pretty embarrassing.
Yes.
I was shooting. I had a busy schedule. I was probably shooting 3 or 4 real estate jobs a day for 2 weeks. And there was one job that for some reason my exposure compensation button got pushed. Mm-hmm. And it went to 2 stops over.
Oh, no.
My exposure compensation. And I was such in a hurry. It was like the last shoot of the week. And I was just ready to knock it out, get it done, go through the steps so I can get the images delivered and have a fun weekend. Well, I shot this last property 2 stops over the entire property. So when I got home and I downloaded the images on the computer and I looked at them, I just had to walk away from the computer. I didn't know what to do. I knew those were just blown and I wasn't getting them back and they were just gone. So I called the real estate agent. I told him what had happened. I said, I felt so bad. This might not have been the smartest business decision, but I told him that I would refund his money and go shoot the property again at no charge for his time wasted. And he accepted that. He was happy. I still shot for him after that. But just having to call him and explain that I screwed up the shoot because the exposure compensation button, because I wasn't paying attention. I was in a hurry. I definitely learned a lesson on that, but just picking up the phone and making that call was probably the worst feeling I've had with a camera.
Sure, man. Yeah, that hurts me just to think about. But I think that you actually made the right business decision because ultimately, I think perhaps, now I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume that working in an industry like yours where you have such close relationships with these agents or brokers where you're working with them over and over again, I mean, like literally one slip up could be the end of it with all of work with them. And I think if you lost out on that one property, it was technically your fault. You saved face, and I think that you made the right decision. I would have personally made the exact same call for sure. So, but yeah, oh, dude, my heart hurts for you, and I'm glad that it worked out in the end. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Wade, I really want to appreciate. I want to thank you for your time, and I truly appreciate everything that you've shared here today. Can you go ahead and let the listeners know where they can find you online, check out some of your work?
Sure. The best place where I keep updated is my Instagram, at Wade Steelman Photo on Instagram. Like I said, my website, I haven't updated my website in a couple of years just because I'm so busy. Mm-hmm. When I get free time, I'm working on that now. But my website is wadesteelmanphoto.com. There are some older images there. They're pretty decent. I don't think they're my best, but they're pretty decent. But I constantly keep my Instagram at Wade Steelman Photo updated on a regular basis.
Perfect. Wade, man, again, thank you so much for everything, and I really appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to keeping up with you on Instagram. I can personally say that I've been following along and seeing some fun projects. You just, was it recently, was working with Peyton Manning here from Indianapolis. Yeah. I feel like an idiot for forgetting that name. Peyton Manning. How did that happen?
So that was you just interviewed Rob Andrew a few weeks ago. So I second shoot for Rob Andrew, and Rob Andrew got that Peyton Manning shoot. So I was a second shooter with him, and just kind of how it worked out, he had to go start shooting some client stuff, and I was kind of left with Peyton Manning for a while, so I just started shooting him. That was a Rob Andrew job that I kind of tagged along on, but it was fun. It was great to meet him, and it was great.
I can imagine. I cannot imagine. That must have been wonderful. Well, again, so yeah, just more proof to follow you along on Instagram. It's good stuff. But Wade, again, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
There were so many pieces of gold in that interview that I'm going to hold on to, and one specifically, which obviously, like, I'm aware of this. I have been through this, but it's you who I really want to, I'm not trying to force you to go in any direction, right? But I really want you to understand how not important gear is. There's so much gear out there, and Wade touched upon this perfectly, right? With the pocket wizards and the name brand, Nikon speed lights. He's got to have those things. It's so not worth it. It is so not worth it. Now there's things, right? Like a good tripod, a good light stand. Those things, totally worth the money, because even though it's like triple the money, still like it's not that expensive, right? Triple the cost of like a cheap one or whatever. It's not that expensive. So, you focus on those things, and you don't care. You can save your money and try to focus on taking great photos with the gear that you do have until it really limits you. Until it really, really, really is limiting you, and then it makes sense to upgrade. But until then, keep it and use it. That was so great. Wade, if you're listening, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. I truly enjoyed talking with you, and I'm looking forward to having you back. I got to have you back sometime. All right. Well, guys, that is it for this interview. I really want to know what your biggest takeaway was. If you are in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, let me know in there. Let me know. Share what your biggest takeaway was, because I guarantee that you're not the only one who feels that way. And somebody else, just like you, is feeling the exact same thing and got the exact same takeaway. So that's it. Guys, if you are enjoying this podcast, I would be so appreciative if you just took 1 minute of your time to leave us a review in iTunes. It really helps the podcast be discovered by more listeners just like you, to help them in their photography journey. We're all in different spots, and I'm just hoping to help as many people as I can. All right, guys, that's it. I love you all. Okay, get out there, keep shooting, stay safe, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.